Hi students, this is the third of 4 short videos that you're watching for Lesson 2, Week 2 in Geography class. As you can see, I have a couple of maps behind me and I wanted to talk about interpreting these maps. And this has to do with location and also human environmental interaction and culture. All of these concepts that I'm going to talk about right now in the distortions in these maps have to do with our perceptual regions and our perceptions of the Earth and the reality of where things are on Earth. So these 2 photos behind me are pictures from the maps that I put on the wall in my geography classroom. They have some built-in distortions that are kind of part of what happens when you take a 3-dimensional object like the planet Earth and you try to spread it out and represent it in a 2-dimensional image on a flat poster. And so these maps are flat posters, and they are Mercator projections of the map that takes these northern latitudes up here and the longitude lines that going up the globe get narrower and narrower and narrower toward the poles. It spreads those out so that these lines can be parallel to each other. Now I have drawn with my dry erase marker an outline on a couple of lines that we have talked about in previous lessons. For instance, this is the international date line. It doesn't exactly correspond to any particular line of longitude like the Greenwich prime meridian does over here. It's just straight. This one zigzags to different addresses of longitude because we want to keep land masses within certain time zones, for instance, and so that's why this is a man-made zigzag on this idea. The perception of time is and date is controlled by that international date line. This horizontal line, I've got it a little crooked, but this horizontal line on this map is actually where the equator was placed on this particular map projection. So the equator, of course, is 0 degrees longitude, and it is smack dab in the middle of the Earth. And so this represents the northern hemisphere, while this represents the southern hemisphere. And it is true that the majority of land masses are in the northern hemisphere, but this is one example of a distortion, another distortion on a map projection like this, where they have the center of the Earth's body, the equator, way down here, well more than halfway down the map. So it gives us in our mental maps that we construct about places and just our position within the world, it might give us a distorted mental map regarding the actual organization, structure, and design of a particular location or of our place on the Earth. So a lot of these distortions are unavoidable with trying to make this a continuous ocean. You will see some of the maps in your textbook that break it down, break the world down, and have little circular, little elliptical shaped regions where you can break up these lines of longitude and have the map be more accurate in size. So you'll see those throughout our textbook. I think there's one on page 14 and 15 as the book opens that you can see one of those maps like I'm describing. But there are some distortions on maps that are definitely avoidable and also can give us clues about power and about control and different kinds of attitudes that exist among the people who make the maps or sell the maps. For instance, I have these two maps side by side. This one does not have the exact same size distortion. For instance, this country right here is Greenland, and right here, this is how it's represented on this map, this enormous purple area and this enormous brownish area over here. This one is clearly smaller than this one in proportionate size, but it's still very large compared to what the actual size is, because they're trying to spread out these longitude lines here to make it on a flat surface. But do you notice anything else that's different about these maps besides the way that this one has a bit of a curvature to these lines of longitude? It doesn't have enough curvature to the lines of longitude where it doesn't distort size at the top, but it's got a little bit of a curvature to try to control some of that. Another distortion that you might notice on this map compared to this one is that whoever designed this map split Asia right down the middle so that the Americas, and particularly the United States, could be as close to the center of the map as possible. And in our mental maps that we create about the world, if we think of the United States as the center of it, we can think of ourselves, or it might bring about the attitude that we are the most important place, or we are the most significant location on the planet, or the region that matters the most is the United States. And these kinds of subtle messages, simply by, well, I guess subtle isn't the right word. You have to be pretty brazen to cut a continent in half like this. But these kinds of images can create subtle messages in our mind that perhaps present biases for the way that we think about our relationship to the world, our place's role in the rest of the world. So this map over here does not cut Asia in two. This map over here doesn't even really cut the Pacific Ocean in two, because it's trying to curve the Earth somewhat. So whereas we have Alaska presented in its entirety here, over here, way off in the corner, you can see part of Alaska also, because this is trying to give you that circular perspective. Here's part of Russia up here in this left-hand corner, and here is Russia right here in the right-hand corner also, because it's repeating some of those things to try to correct for some of the distortion. So it's important to know that maps have to have certain features accompanying with them for them to be useful for us. Not all maps have the same features. We will cover that in class next week. But some maps have to have certain features in order to be useful for us. But all maps, we have to be careful when we're interpreting them, because we have to know what was the purpose for which they were made, and whether there are some distortions in the map that can perhaps lead us to believe in a certain way that the creator of the map wants us to believe, rather than reality, for instance. It doesn't happen entirely often in the world of GIS and global positioning systems, but some of these historic maps, like I'm showing you here in these two pictures, it's interesting to see the kind of imperialism or power that might be at play in the minds of the people who created the maps in the first place. So there's one more short video that you're not going to see me in. It's just a short clip from a show called The West Wing that I want you to watch. It has to do with distortions of maps and how it can create different ideas in our mind about reality of the world. So anyway, I will post a link for that. It's one of the videos in my playlist on the YouTube channel, and please make sure that you watch all 4 of these videos. You will have some quiz questions that overlap with the content of both the first lesson and this 4-part lesson 2 in week 2. And also, all this information is going to be relevant for project 1. So please pay close attention and review these videos as needed. Text me with questions. Thanks.